Hi there. My name is Crystal Bay, and this is my chapter, How I Learned to Fly, from the book We Choose to Be More Than Our Diagnosis. Do you ever feel like you hide parts of yourself from others? Like you hide your dog's meds in a piece of cheese? That's how I felt for most of my life. Mental health was non-existent in my house growing up. When it was brought up, it was always in hushed tones, like a dirty secret that shouldn't be let out. This mindset has affected me throughout my life more than I ever realized. It wasn't until I was 37 years old and recently out of a very abusive relationship that I found a therapist who actually saw me and correctly diagnosed me with ADHD, CPTSD, and neurodivergence. I sometimes wonder what would be different if I'd been properly diagnosed as a teenager, how different my life would have been. As a kid, I remember my mom never talking about anything related to negative feelings. She looked down on medicines like Adderall and Ritalin, making comments like, now he's just a zombie. She should be able to control him without treating him. It felt like she was saying that mental disabilities like ADHD, anxiety, depression, and the like weren't real, and that the parents are to blame for not being stricter with their kids. When I was in 8th grade and forced to go to therapy by the Department of Children and Families to get help regarding my home life, she made a mockery of it by finding a therapist who could be bought. That instilled a distrust in therapy in me, which was reinforced when I was 17 and in a program for troubled teens. They tried to diagnose me with borderline personality disorder, which was way off base, but I'll get into that in a bit. It wasn't until recently that I found out why my mom felt the way she does about mental disabilities. It was because of her upbringing. Her mom had been in and out of mental institutions her entire childhood because of what she went through during World War II. I think she grew up feeling ashamed and blamed her mom for the things lacking in her life, and the fact that she had to be mom to her two younger siblings. I genuinely believe it's because of this that she has what I call the ostrich syndrome, burying your head in the sand until whatever is wrong goes away. She never wanted to hurt me. She didn't understand that she was a victim of generational trauma, and in turn, continuing the cycle. I have spoken with her in depth about this in the last few years, and we have made peace with what happened while I was growing up. It's tough because life is messy, and so is generational dysfunction, abuse, and lack of emotional intelligence, wellness, and safety. The thing is, the signs were all there about me having ADHD, but back then, it was just a boy's diagnosis, not girls'. I would talk too much in class, get easily distracted, and get bored with subjects I didn't like. I also had a difficulty memorizing some things, but could remember a book I read months or years before. So, by not having me tested for neurodivergence and ADHD in my youth, my education and life were very much altered from what they should have been. Having a proper diagnosis allows you to learn how to work with it and recognize the signs and what to do to embrace and live with it. Now that I've covered the lack of proper mental health diagnosis within my home, let's discuss the misdiagnosis that was attempted to be given to me by my counselor in the youth program I was in. Now, I will say that when I was told about this, my mom took me to the bookstore and we bought a few books on it. This is what we found. Borderline personality disorder, BPD, typically isn't diagnosed until a person is in their mid-20s because of how the human brain and personality develop during adolescence and early childhood. Definitely not at 17. And here's why. 1. Personality is still forming. In teens and young adults, identity, emotional regulation, and behavioral patterns are still maturing. What may appear as symptoms of BPD, such as emotional instability, impulsiveness, or intense relationships, can be a regular part of adolescent development. Number 2, the brain is still developing. The prefrontal cortex, which controls decision-making, impulse regulation, and emotional reasoning, continues to develop into the mid-20s. Some traits that resemble BPD may resolve naturally as the brain matures. 3. Risk of misdiagnosis. Early symptoms of BPD can overlap with other conditions like depression, anxiety, trauma response, or ADHD, which can lead to incorrect labeling and inappropriate treatment if diagnosed too early. 4. The stigma and identity concerns. Labeling a teen with a personality disorder can affect their self-identity and mental health trajectory, reinforcing a sense of being broken or permanently disordered during a fragile developmental phase. Armed with this information, my mom had me transferred to the other counselor in the programs, especially because the woman who tried to diagnose me wasn't even a licensed therapist. The thing is, it made me even more untrusting of mental health professionals, and it stayed with me long into my 20s, which is ironic, as my aunt always said that I would be an excellent therapist because of my natural empathic nature, wanting to help people and outgoing personality. I did take some psychology classes during my first attempt at college when I thought I wanted to be a teacher, thinking it would help me with working with students and their parents. Now, let's move forward to my mid-30s, when I started thinking that therapy might be needed, and that not all therapists are like what I experienced as a child. The memory would resurface about a children's therapist. She helped me when I was 7 years old to deal with nightmares I was having. She was kind and did help. At first, it was because they wanted my now ex-partner to go to therapy for his anger issues, along with both of us together for family therapy, but he refused. But when I finally left him, my mental state was in shambles, and I bit the bullet and went to both addiction and mental health therapy. This is when I was formally diagnosed with CPTSD, ADHD, and because of the physical trauma to my brain from the abuse I endured, neurodivergent. She asked me why I was never diagnosed with ADHD, and also why no one helped me with my issues from my childhood. And well, I've already explained that to you, my dear reader. But getting this diagnosis put a lot of my life and personality traits into perspective for me. It also made me realize that I'd been correctly diagnosed, how different my life would have been. You see, the thing about being properly diagnosed is that you learn how to work with it instead of not understanding why you're acting the way you are. As I continued with my therapy and putting my life back together after the shambles it was from my bad choices, I began finding ways to cope and improve myself, recognizing the things that trigger my anxiety, a side effect of my CPTSD, and how to recognize them when my focus is slipping to my ADHD, are just a few things that have helped. I began researching all three of my diagnoses, wanting to understand them better, trying all different types of therapies and coping tools, and have been able to come up with a toolbox that works for me. I made a support system of tools and amazing people who help me when I'm struggling and acknowledge when I have made breakthroughs in growth. It has been almost 5 years since I was diagnosed correctly, and I am still working through the traumas that caused the CPTSD and neurodivergent. I was watching one of my favorite comedians, Taylor Tomlinson, the other day, and when she was talking about her own diagnosis of bipolar and what happened, it really resonated with me. During the show, when she said she was told her therapist that she didn't know how she felt about it, she said her therapist responded with, well, you can always say I have bipolar, not I am bipolar. And she said, isn't that like saying you're acting like a bitch? And that part really made me both laugh and think about it. I think she was right in the sense that being something doesn't have to define you. As someone who has multiple mental health diagnosis, I agree that they don't define me, but they are a part of who I am. The little personality quirks are a result of different aspects of each diagnosis. For example, the way I can go from point A to point Z when in a conversation, and talent I call the 7 degrees to Kevin Bacon mindset. Some people understand it, while others, I usually have to explain how they got there. Also, how I don't like it when people feel the need to over-explain things to me as if I can't understand their point when they made it, yet I tend to over-explain myself because of my self-esteem issues, something that I've been overcoming slowly. I multitask and prefer to have something that keeps my mind and hands busy. And I'm the most extroverted introvert you'll ever meet. All of these things are results of my diagnosis, but I use them in different ways in both my professional and personal life. I won't lie, but there are times where it is easier just to say I have ADHD or I'm neurospicy to explain my actions to someone who doesn't know me, or as a joke with others who are showing signs of the same, like ADHD. I also use them to break the ice when speaking with people about my calling, but I don't use it as a way to define myself. I refuse to be put in this tiny box that is characterized by my mental disabilities, especially considering that they are the only part of my personality that shines through. My ability to empathize with others, my loyalty and ability to problem solve and mediate issues, along with my natural leadership ability, are not causes of my mental disabilities, but core parts of my personality. Over the years, I've dabbled in many different ideas for my career, never settling on anything, another characteristic of my ADHD. But one thing was constant. I always wanted to be of service in some way. After I was in therapy for a while, I finally made the choice I fought for years. I'm going back to school to get my psychology degree, to be able to truly help others like myself. I refuse to live by labels and what society claims I am, whether it is my mental health diagnosis or domestic abuse victim, as these are not who I am. Yes, they're part of me, but it is because of them and the rest of my life experiences that I can work with the people I do. I can help them because at some point or another in my life, I was them and have the tools to be able to help them break out of the boxes they are in. To let them know they're not alone and aren't broken or flawed because they have a disability or trauma. They just have different abilities that should be embraced and used to lift themselves up and learn how to navigate life with confidence. I am Crystal Phoenix Bay and choose to fly using my diagnosis as the wind beneath my wings, not break them.